Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
John, you know, sometimes you see these articles and you just go like, okay, this is the exact example of the law of unintended consequences. Okay, you ready for this one?
I'm ready for this one.
Dateline in this story is someplace up in the Northeast. This is in, what city is this in? This is in Fox Park, New Jersey. This event was at Fox Park in the Jersey Shore town of Wildwood, not the Wildwood we have here. Okay.
Yeah.
For decades, one of the featured events was the local police department has a golf cart that they have rigged so teenagers specifically can drive the golf cart. And it simulates what it's like to drive drunks. In other words, they rig the steering wheel so the steering doesn't necessarily respond properly, and you have to drive a course with orange traffic cones. Okay, so
I'm laughing already.
Okay, well, it
just sounds like a nightmare.
It's actually sort of a sad story. Here's the one paragraph that describes what happened. A golf cart with a teenager and a police officer left an enclosed course surrounded by orange cones, police said. Read the rest of it. 4 adults and a child were struck and injured. Wildwood firefighters already at the event responded and treated the injured on the site. Their injuries were not disclosed. The 5 people struck were taken to Cape Regional Medical Center. 3 were treated and released, and 2 were still hospitalized as of Wednesday. So in other words, somehow or another, the teenager and the police officer who's supervising them, the golf cart really did a DWI thing, and it plowed through the crowd and hurt 5 people. Okay? Is that bizarre or what? I mean, talk about...
But isn't there some? You would think that there's something, Brad, that you know way more about the stuff than I do. But if I gave you a golf cart and said, okay, jerry rig this so that it's all messed up, why would you think that something would be okay? Like, why would you think that altering the steering wheel or the accelerator or the brake would end that situation would end up well?
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. The story goes on to say that they've done this for decades. This tragic incident is disconcerting to the entire city of Wildwood Police Department, and we would like to offer our sincere thoughts and prayers to the injured individuals. But the annual event is held in an effort to build stronger relationship between the police and the community. The low-speed golf cart course used to simulate impaired motoring has been part of the event for the past 2 decades. So for 20-plus years, they've been. So
their luck ran out.
Right there. And I'm going like, and once again, we're not laughing at the poor people that got injured. It's to the point where it's like, okay, think about this. They're doing something good. They're showing people. Matter of fact, Missouri Highway Patrol, I don't know if they still have it or not, and a lot of times you go to different events and things like that, they would have the rollover car. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've seen that.
And essentially they had like a dummy they would put in the car, and the car was like set up like on a rotisserie, and they would spin the thing around, and the dummy would be flailing around inside the car and sometimes be thrown out. And the idea was they were showing, okay, if we run the demonstration again and we put the seatbelt on the dummy, the seatbelt, holds him in place, and yeah, he's going to have some injuries, but he ain't going to be ejected, and chances are he's going to survive. Whereas if you don't have your seatbelt on, you're going to get ejected. And you know what? I'm sorry, but whenever you hear the police report that the passenger or the driver was ejected, the next part of that report is they were killed, right? It's almost always.
I can't believe in 2024 there are people that don't wear seatbelts.
Well, I can tell you an interesting story that, I mean, in my lifetime, cars didn't have seatbelts. My very first car I ever bought did not have seatbelts. And to the point where you want to hear Brad's.
I was just going to say, it sounds like you're thinking of whether to tell a story or not, and I think you should.
I asked this girl out for a date, okay, and I'm going to pick her up. This is in my '62 Pontiac station wagon, which I wish I had back, because the car that my very first car that I owned for $100. I now see them pop on eBay from time to time for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. Okay, I had this car. Actually, I had two of them at one point in time. That's a whole other story. So I modified it. I took the bench seat out in the front. I put bucket seats in. And not only did I put in seat belts, I put in shoulder harnesses, which at the time was like nobody had shoulder harnesses in their car. It just didn't happen, okay? So,
and this is so let's point out that when you do this, your dedication to safety, Brad, was far and above what anybody else on the road had.
Well,
go ahead.
So I go to pick up this girl, and her mom and dad come out to inspect my car, and because they don't want this girl, me driving, and the mother's like, well, that car's, at the time it was a '62, and people knew that, I think it was pre-'65, cars didn't have seatbelts. And she says, that car doesn't have seatbelts. I'm not going to let my daughter in it. So as I walk her to the car, I go, ma'am, not only does it have seatbelts, it has shoulder harnesses. And once again, they're not the kind they are today. The early shoulder harnesses were two-piece. You had the lap belt that went around your lap, and you had another belt with another buckle that went around your shoulder, crossed over your body. So you had to put two things on. It wasn't like today where you push the thing, you pull the thing over one buckle and it's got the lap belt and the shoulder belt. And her dad was impressed, and her dad was looking at my work, how I drilled into the beak pillars, and he's going, well, where did you anchor the bolts in the car? I go, well, they're anchored to the frame. And he's like, impressed. So I scored points with her father, but her mother didn't like it. And you know why her mother didn't like it?
Who was that?
The back of my station wagon, I had carpeting in it, and she did not like that.
Because she thought that maybe,
Right.
There we go. Say no more.
Yeah, she thought that maybe her daughter, her purse might fall in the back there, and my shag carpeting was so deep she wouldn't find her purse. That's why. Okay, I mentioned this earlier in the week, and John went, and I'm not making fun of you, John. I mentioned GARM, and you went, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and you sent me the article
I sent you the article. Okay, this is actually sort of fascinating. Until I saw this, I didn't even know this existed, and I didn't even know the World Federation of Advertisers existed. They started this thing called GARM, Global Alliance for Responsible Media, GARM. The group we created to help marketers avoid placing their ads alongside content they find objectionable. Okay, the standards have been under increasing security in Washington scrutiny, where conservative media outlets, including talk radio and conservative podcasts, have said GARM was used to keep them off ad buys. This goes back to the early days of the Rush Limbaugh show. When Rush Limbaugh started to get popular, there were groups of people who were boycotting, who wanted to have the major advertisers boycott Rush Limbaugh. Because once upon a time, when Rush Limbaugh got popular, once again, people buy advertising for the numbers, and it all comes down to how big the numbers are, how cost effective it is, and not to bore you, but gross rating points, all that kind of stuff. The example I give is that today, if you go by a gas station and the sign says gas is $5.22 a gallon, you go, oh my God, that's terrible. You can go down to QT and it's $3.19. Okay, it's the same thing in advertising. Yep. You can say, okay, to reach X amount of people, cost per mil or whatever you want to look at, cost per thousand is X. Okay, so when Rush Limbaugh started to get popular, his show was very efficient for advertisers, but people hated Rush Limbaugh, so they wrote letters to General Motors saying, oh, I can't believe you sponsored that guy. It's terrible, terrible person. So this GARM agency or group put together this thing where they were warning all their advertisers about, oh, you don't want to be on this website because this guy is a nutbag, and you don't want to be on this radio station because blah, 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 blah. And it's interesting because they were boycotting websites. They were boycotting the Daily Wire, which was originally co-started by Ben Shapiro and another guy. Do you know the name of the other guy?
Yeah, I forgot. Was it Steven Crowder?
I don't know if it was Steve. I don't think it was Steven
Crowder. I don't know
Crowder.
if it was.
But
it was somebody else, though.
Anyway, you know how – did you read the whole article?
Well, I skimmed it, yeah.
The interesting part of it was...
And Rogan is involved in it, right?
Right. Rogan's involved in it because he has the same thing. People boycott him because of the fact that he doesn't toe the liberal line, and he says things that he was very much anti-vaxxing. And people, oh my God, he's a terrible person because he's telling us we shouldn't get vaccines. So how it went to a head, the article talked about that the World Federation of Advertisers is disbanding GARM because you know why, John?
Why is that?
They got a bunch of letters from the House Judiciary Committee wanting to say, okay, explain to us how you say who is good and who is bad as far as placing your advertising money. So instead of going through the scrutiny of showing up at the House and explaining what they're doing, they just said, we'll just shut it down, which essentially is what? Almost a admission of guilt, wouldn't you say that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big win. Yeah, and clearly, can you imagine them trying to justify? Well, here's the thing: everybody can have an opinion, but if it's an incorrect opinion on these issues, then you don't get to be part of the club.
Right. And once again, the thing for me, you know me well enough, and I've said this many times. You don't like what we say here in the air? Come on the air and dispute it. Right now, my phone number, 314-280-8880. That is my phone number. You can call me, you can text me. If there's something that John and I have said that you say, matter of fact, I had an interesting text last night from someone I hadn't talked to probably in a couple of years. And matter of fact, you want me to read it to you to give you an idea of out of the clear blue? Here comes this text. Let me see if I can find it here real quick. Okay, last night, 8:13 p.m. And I haven't talked to this person probably 2 years. You mean to say you seriously support J.D. Vance? ? And I said, my response was, this is like tongue-in-cheek response. Him and his couch. That's what I responded. Okay, if you know.
Oh my God.
If you know the whole story. Okay, and the response back after I said him and his couch is, well, he is a dick.
Yeah. Well. Okay.
And again, I said to this person, and the interesting thing is, I didn't know they listened to the podcasts, and that's what is interesting in this. They said, I listen to your podcast from time to time. And apparently they were listening when you and I were talking about J.D. Vance and the whole bit. So I said to this person, come on the air, and I'm more than willing to let you, give me your viewpoint on this, because you know what? I respect other people's viewpoints. I'm not just going to say that my viewpoint's right and yours is wrong, and I'm not going to let you on the air. I'm open-minded. Come on and talk about it. There are probably people that agree with you that listen to the show. Let's get it out there in the open. Of course not.
What we could have done, by the way, we should have thought about the fact that maybe you could have texted J.D. Vance and he would have taken care of your couch for you.
Well,
instead of calling 1-800-GOT-JUNK.
Yeah, if you're my luck, I told you when I called college hunks hauling junk. They wanted to charge me, was it $458 to remove a couch?
Something ridiculous.
From a walkout
Nothing
basement?
That a Sawzall can't fix.
Right, that Sawzall. I have to charge a couple batteries up this weekend. That couch is going in pieces this weekend. Okay, but the crazy part of this is that if you know what I'm referring to, this thing about him and his couch, they claim, and once again, here we go again, they claim that in his book, Hillbilly Elegy, that he says he had sex with his couch, which is not in the book, right? And yet,
I couldn't, and I didn't. I have to admit, I didn't do a deep dive in it, but I saw the allusions to it, and I thought, well, that's obviously not like he clearly didn't say that.
He didn't. And what's interesting about it is there's been a thing recently where, if you know this Project 2025. I've read part of the Project 2025. I've downloaded its Heritage Foundation, the whole bit like that. Not Biden. Trump is getting tarred and feathered by, he's supporting Project 2025. It's done by the Heritage Foundation, okay? Yeah. And I saw a listing on a Facebook page, and it had a quote. And it said, a quote, this is what's in Project 2025. And the quote had an attribution line on the bottom, and it said it was in page 522, paragraph 3. There is no page 522 in whatever it was. In other words, it was BS. Because because I can't remember what it was. There were like 300 pages in the Project 2025. There was no page, whatever they talked about, it was not there. It was just BS. And people put that stuff out there and people go, oh my God, you know that Project 2025? Oh my God, that's terrible. Do you know what Trump wants to do? Matter of fact, what was interesting is that they got so much negative publicity. The guy that, I don't know if you know this part of the story, the guy that authored the Project 2025 for the Heritage Foundation, they fired him.
I saw that, just based on the blowback.
Right, and Trump said, "Hey, that's not my deal. I'm not the American Heritage Foundation. That's this think tank." And once again, think tank is a 501c3 that doesn't pay any taxes, and it's all these brainiac guys sitting around in D.C. Hey, let's put out a white paper on the fact that everybody should use a Sharpie instead of an ink pen because Sharpies are much easier to read for people who have visibility issues. Okay, why? I mean, doesn't everybody know that if you write with a Sharpie, it's going to be easier to read than an ink pen? Well, we need to have a 300-page dissertation on that. Do you think we can get a government grant for that? I bet you we get $2 million for a government grant for that. I bet you the Department of Human Welfare I bet you the Missouri Department of Human Services would give us money for that. That's how a lot of these organizations work. Am I kidding, John?
No, you're right. And one of the things that led me to doing the show with you, Brad, is I was so impressed by the fact you didn't do white papers and you only did Mocha Java papers. Because everybody does white papers. And I'm so tired of white papers. And I'm like, show me a man who can do something different. Pause. That sounded very Pete Buttigieg there. But I was like, show me a man who can do it differently, There's interesting things because there's some people that do not listen to the show because I don't use zigzag papers. Oh, yeah. I'm more of a Swisher Sweep guy, but,
John, we've beaten this one to death.
It's been a hell of a week, Brad, hasn't it?
Yeah, we're going to look back on this period of time, the last 2 months and the next 3 months to come, and we'll go, remember back in 2024 when all the crazy crap happened, when Trump got shot and this happened and Biden got thrown out and now he won't talk to Nancy Pelosi anymore and they're not buddies anymore. Remember that time, John? Remember?
And I'll remember the fact, I'll be like, remember that Friday when I tried to get my AC guy named Brad to come over and do a little off-the-books work. And I'm like, my evaporator coil and my water pan and all this stuff. And you know what? He was on his stupid boat actually, I should be more correct. He was at a stupid kayak at a crap transmitter.
Right.
And so I reported him to the Biden administration, and he got taken into custody under waters of the U.S. So it did have a happy ending, Brad.
John, I believe as long as I can declare you as an extended family member, I think I can come fix your air conditioner. I won't be in trouble. You're my long lost cousin, from Aunt Elmo or something like that. Okay, say goodbye, John.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?